Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century, in which I write daily of my vision of the future of money, in which Bitcoin is the center of the universe. Try my free 7-day trial membership and contact me anytime at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com to arrange cryptocurrency and/or precious metal related consultations or get details on how to safely split Bitcoin forks. Today's one-on-one episode, the 26th, features someone World Crypto Network listeners know well, who in my view defines the age-old saw of being wise beyond one's years. The son of a longtime Wall Street trader, who I was lucky enough to share the panel with in a November Bitcoin news podcast focused on the introduction of CME Bitcoin futures, his knowledge of the market aspects of cryptocurrency are matched by his coding accomplishments, having by himself invented the free-to-all Zap Bitcoin wallet, which you can access at zap.jackmallers.com. Yes, it's Jack Mellers himself, who can also be found on Twitter at @JackMellers. We have lots to discuss today, so on that note, welcome, Jack, to One-on-One.
Thank you. I am a fan of yours and of this one-on-one show, so it is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay, so first off, especially given my background in finance, I want to discuss your background in financial markets, given that your dad and granddad were major players in the Chicago option and futures markets. Did you work in commodities or futures trading, or just pick up a lot along the way? As frankly, your comments on the topic are a lot more informed than people I've observed in the business for many decades.
Yeah, so I have not been involved formally in financial markets as far as trading. I've never been in a pit. My background just comes from Thanksgiving dinner, family text messaging. My general family, which extends even outside of my father and grandfather, aunts, uncles, everyone was involved in Chicago finance, futures market, options market, CBOE. So anytime I'm with family, that's all we talk about is markets. And we've all kind of made this transition into crypto. But I have no real formal background. It's all just overhearing what much smarter people say that just happen to be in my family. So I'm lucky.
That's funny, because in my family, I've been in finance my entire career, and then gold and then crypto, and I can't think of a single person in my family that has the slightest interest in anything I have to talk about, so, which is fine. So I separate it, and you don't. It works for both of us. Okay, so to that end, let's talk about the state of the cryptocurrency markets, and as well the impact, if any, that futures markets have had on Bitcoin. To start, what's your take on this fall's Bitcoin-centric surge, the subsequent altcoin explosion, the massive and seasonally typical correction, and the recovery of sorts to date? As well, what role, if any, do you believe futures trading has had on these dramatic but typical for cryptocurrency moves?
So to address just the general market cycle, this is just very typical for Bitcoin. I've been around with my family since early 2013. So I was there for the Mt. Gox days. And I wouldn't compare it to Gox. It wasn't nearly as bad and nearly as tragic. The industry is so much more mature, both in infrastructure and also investors, market cap, players that are involved. But this is just typical market cycles. This is a technology that is evolving, and price can't grow at X amount per day. It goes up, it goes down, but the general trend is up, and I'm extremely bullish on Bitcoin. As far as futures markets, I actually, so obviously my family has history with CME and Chicago futures. These are usually very high integrity products that they protect. We actually don't like to compare it to Wall Street. We think these are, CME chased out. I think it was I think it was the wheat bubble and wheat pit and pushed into Wall Street. It's usually very high integrity products. That's why I was very shocked at how Coinbase treated the CME with their index, with that Bcash launch. So I think these are high integrity products. I don't think there's going to be a lot of scamming or manipulation in price going on with these guys. I know that Wall Street gets that reputation. So I don't think it's had that much of an influence, to be honest with you. I think that the volume is very low compared to other markets. And I don't know. I think it'll start to play a larger role when we see ETFs and when these institutional investors start to get more comfortable and start to fill their bids, which I think they did at 6,000. So.
Right, right. Well, 6,000 was the number I was talking about from the beginning. Once you get there, that's $100 billion market cap, and
I
that's
know that's your number.
yeah, that's when institutions come in and guess where they were waiting to stop the price decline at exactly that number. And you know, you talk about, I mean, there's so many things to address from what you've said here, you know, about high integrity products. Now, I of course have a background of 15 years of fighting the gold cartel, which use various derivatives. I mean, futures are just one aspect of it. There's all kinds of off-balance sheet things going on, leasing, swapping, the ETFs. So it's not like there's any specific thing. And of course, in gold and silver, we're talking about very, very mature, deep markets. So when people say stuff like, well, Bitcoin futures are manipulating the market, aside from all the other reasons that I've discussed in the past why that's kind of a silly concept, they are not very deep markets. These are brand new markets with very, very low volumes. And much of the, you know, like you see what happened last night, you know, the price declines occur when the futures are closed often. So it's kind of, I'm not worried about the futures, and I look forward to them getting deeper. And the biggest part of it is that the governments, you know, the Western governments have been colluding for years to rig a lot of markets. And one of them has been the gold market, the stock market. There's no plan in place with Bitcoin. They have no idea what to do, and no governments own Bitcoin. They have no idea how they would manipulate it anyway. And right now, it's just a thinly traded market, which I think is a good thing.
I particularly enjoyed, you know, a lot of the really early adopter libertarian Bitcoin maximalists and how they addressed someone like CME launching a product, especially that it was cash settled and it wasn't settling the underlying. It was just a lot of this kind of attitude of, you know, fight the man's here to ruin the party, you know, what do they have up their sleeve? And I totally respect that viewpoint. That's why a lot of these people got involved in this industry. But I really don't see it that way, you know, at least not yet. There's no evidence. It's super low volume. And as far as I'm concerned, Terry Duffy and the CME want to bring crypto and make it accessible in a lot of these portfolios and allow these people to hedge against, you know, global crisis with Bitcoin, as they should. So far, you know, the market crashed. I mean, if that's even what you want to call it, to levels we saw 3 months ago. This, to me, is just, it's very low volume on a lot of these financial products. And this is just typical market cycles in Bitcoin, where if you've been around, you sleep through these. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like this morning, the price went under 10,000, then it jumped back over 10,000. And I'm thinking, man, remember when it jumped over 10,000 back in late November, was the 29th? We had a party on on the World Crypto Network. There were like 10 of us there for 2 hours, and we were all excited. Now it goes over, and we're like, oh, you know, I mean, finally, with, you know. But the point is, yes, we had a big bubble, certainly in altcoins. We had an over-exaggeration to the things, the positive. This is what I talked about in my audio blog today. The very, very positive events that happened in Bitcoin this fall, which made it worth a lot more. And as a result, you know, we are now consolidating. And that's, you know, you're talking about people are not used to this. The one thing people are not used to in this sector is consolidation. They don't understand the concept that things may actually sit in place for a while. So when it goes up, it comes back down. When it goes down, it comes back up. Everyone's expecting that either some incredible news is going to come out tomorrow, or some incredible explosion in price, or that everything's going to crash to zero. And they don't understand we need to digest the incredible things that just happened, particularly when it comes, you know, in Bitcoin, you're digesting actual real news events. We're talking about the SegWit activation, the defeat of of Roger Ver and all the big blockers. We're talking about all these new technologies like the ones you're developing that are coming online. Whereas in the altcoins, they didn't really win anything. They just were able to, you know, get on the coattails of Bitcoin. Do you see it any other way?
No, I see it the exact same. I've always thought that altcoins were a general arbitrage on the trend of this technology and an arbitrage on the education of the general public that's exposed to this stuff. I've always questioned these high market caps. I don't mind altcoins as an engineer, as someone who writes code. I think it's fine to experiment. I was around for the pre-sale of Ethereum, and the idea itself was not like, the worst idea in the world. I mean, the fact that you can have self-executing contracts on a blockchain, who knows if that will work? Who knows if if it won't? But it shouldn't be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. It should be a hackathon project. The fact that they all have marketing teams and are able to influence price and kind of capture the market of the uneducated in this space is just something that's not sustainable and won't last. So I don't look at altcoins in any other way than, just penny stocks that smart money can, take from dumb money. And yeah, I see it the exact same way.
That's exactly how I've characterized in the past. I call them ultra speculative, unregulated penny stocks that are equivalent to the worst of the dot-coms. Like you said, they are centralized with marketing teams. Their primary function, I've said the primary function of Bcash has been to pump at Bitcoin's expense. That's what they were brought into business to do, not to actually do anything. And the same goes for a lot of the other ones. They are cash grab schemes that came around because Bitcoin was successful. Now, yes, there are a few that can do things. It's debatable. We'll talk about Ethereum in a second. It's debatable if Ethereum's use case is defendable. And they're the biggest. I mean, like you said, that the valuations. Ethereum was valued at $135 billion a few weeks ago. That would make it like the 6th or 7th largest tech company in the world, which it essentially is, except it doesn't really, it has no revenues. It has a lot of competition and issues. It is incredible to me. And I just want to go right into the topic that you can answer on this very thing about Ethereum is, everyone, I did a crypto audio blog this morning. It's called Something to the Matter of the Age of Bitcoin Dominance because of the coming crypto civil wars. And basically what it comes down to is we, as Bitcoin holders, had to deal with a lot of hell the last couple of years. There was constant civil war. Really, when you look at it, it was really one man that was fighting us. For all the people who think it was the scaling debates, it was Roger Ver, who was kind of, whether you believe his intentions were good or not, it was him against Bitcoin, and it caused a lot of issues for a long time. But those issues are done. Bitcoin has won. There's no more debate. But these other coins, I'm starting to see debates going on. Ethereum is in big trouble between Ethereum Classic, the proof of stake versus the proof of work, centralized versus decentralized. There's potentially all kinds of other forks that may come on. Now Monero is going to have a fork, a very contentious fork in the next 2 weeks, and you're starting to realize, wow, there's a lot going on at these other quote companies that they're going to have to fight through while Bitcoin is just rolling ahead with technology. Tell me what you think, Jack. Again, more about Ethereum. Is Ethereum defensible against Cardano and Rootstock Bitcoin and all these other things and its own vulnerabilities as a centralized coin?
So my general thoughts on Ethereum are not too good. Ethereum fans, plug your ears. I'm not a fan on these Turing complete smart contracts. I don't think that that's actually a useful feature or a scalable feature and one that works in practice. In theory, all of this stuff is great. Putting Uber on a blockchain, in theory, is awesome. In practice, it's not even close to functional. So a lot of this word salad and these pitching, I think a lot of the old timers, people way before me, people in my Bitcoin class of 2013, we get upset when the marketing word salad, when the lead developers aren't upfront about how insecure and unstable this stuff is. And market, that's when we get really upset. So I think Ethereum has done a terrible job. The fact that it's worth whatever you said, 135 billion recently, is insane to me and just strictly irresponsible on the shoulders of the people that have been driving that car. So that's my general thoughts on Ethereum. Now, as far as their civil war and are they going to have one that we had with the Bcash Segwit 2X crowd, I don't know, and I don't really care. I don't think Ethereum works, and it will be around for as long as people think. I think it's in a massive bubble, and it has no real utility and demand. What I think is interesting, though, is that a lot of the Bitcoin critics are, decentralized governance doesn't work, or, small blocks don't work. We need to boost the block size, or whatever the case is. I think it's important to recognize that these characteristics come with any decentralized, cryptocurrency that operates on a blockchain where data is supposed to be stored on all the participants of the network's computer and everyone's operating business logic and verifying constantly and updating this ledger every 10 minutes or whatever, the parameters are, is that, these problems come with all of them. Bitcoin was not born with any deficiencies that won't come with all these other coins. It's just the most used. So it sees these problems first. It has the most network effects. It's the farthest along the roadmap. So all of these coins will face this. Litecoin, Monero, Ethereum, they all are different in their own little unique ways. But if any of them actually get any adoption, any use, if any, Ethereum has these crypto all-stars or crypto kitties, most ridiculous things I've ever heard. Yeah, the blockchain is going to get clogged. People aren't going to be able to use the network because these things don't scale in traditional ways. And decentralized governance is hard. And the fact that there's no man in charge is a problem, or there is a man in charge like Vitalik, and that's a whole separate issue. So that's the point that I like to bring up to others is Ethereum facing, a governance issue, a civil war? Yeah. Is that a bad thing? No, I think that that's just a characteristic of these systems. But it's important to point out that it goes for all of them, and none of these altcoins get to bypass any of this stuff. If you don't have these problems, it means that, you're not generating enough authentic demand. That doesn't mean that you've designed a system that can bypass a lot of the stuff Bitcoin has been facing.
Right, and as Adam Meister was saying the other day, give it to Ethereum. They are the only other cryptocurrency that has even gotten to the point where there's actual infighting. I mean, yes, in Monero there's a hard fork, but actual debates about the future means you actually have had some demand. But like you're saying, I mean, to me this is pretty dramatic information you're giving about Ethereum, and people should take heed. The easy money. Look, you may have witnessed the only real period of easy money in altcoins that you're going to see, certainly for any time. I mean, if you think everyone that all of a sudden everything's going to turn around and it's going to be like it was a month and a half ago, or any altcoin, no matter what it is, just rockets 10, 20, 30% a day. No, those days are over. You're going to really have to discern yourself going forward as an altcoin, as an ICO, as anything that is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin has proved itself, and it's proving itself every day, which we're going to get to in a second. Everything else, it's buyer beware. And again, this is an unregulated industry. So if you thought buyer beware was bad enough in Wall Street, this is double buyer beware. So next, I want to delve into Jack's background in coding and how you came to be one of the early developers of second layer Bitcoin scaling technologies like the open source Zap wallet. To start, is your education and/or professional background in coding? Did you meet other Lightning Network developers by chance, or you simply had the foresight to focus your efforts on building out a SegWit-enabled Bitcoin network under the assumption, of course, that SegWit would be enabled?
Yeah, so let's unpack that. My last formal education was high school. I went to college for about a month, and I hated it, and I left. So coding has been through like small vocational schools. Most of the stuff that I use today, I taught myself just by like being online, asking questions, a lot of YouTube videos. So my education is not as simple as a 4-year degree, unfortunately. But yeah, my background is just building things, learning. I want something to exist, so I figure out how to make that happen, and I build it. As far as how I got involved in the Lightning Network, it was totally an accident. I've told you I've been involved in Bitcoin for years now, and Lightning is something that was on everyone's mind that had been involved in the industry forever. I think the white paper came out in 2015, I believe, or there's a popular talk at Coinbase at least in 2015, and it was everyone that had an understanding of how this network works and how Bitcoin works at its core knows that any increase in the block size is not a permanent solution. So we were going to have to scale off the blockchain and have these relationships on a second layer, using the blockchain to settle, but to scale to use Bitcoin as a payment system if that's what we wanted to do one day. So I've been interested in it forever. I tried to build some software on top of Bitcoin that utilized the blockchain, and firsthand I saw that it didn't scale. I built like a gambling application where we had quote unquote smart contracts between two peers that gambled, so we didn't have to have a house or a bookie making the lines, and I can bet on online chess games, and everything was hitting the blockchain, and it became really expensive and didn't scale. So I started to look, well, who's building the Lightning Network? Is anyone working on it? I found a Slack room. This was around this time last year, and there was 9 people in it. It was some of the core Lightning developers that you all know well today, like Roast Beef, Elizabeth Stark was in there. But it was only 9 people, and I was blown away. This is so important, and no one is really giving it any attention or any mind, paying it any mind. So I started helping test new features and new code updates, and eventually started working on a wallet so that we can all test this stuff outside of the command line, outside of this like technical interface, and we can use it, you know, like we use other traditional financial apps. And it's just turned into what I work on today. So,
right, and I'll get to that in a second, but I will say a couple of things that come from this. First of all, people, you know, and I think in the show notes, I deemed you as one of the most successful millennials I've come across. But the fact that you were self-taught, I mean, you're working on cutting edge technology without any higher education shows people. I mean, I've been saying forever, you know, people with kids, don't think in terms of I have to save for college, I have to go to college. No, they don't have to go to college. They have to do smart things with their lives. College is expensive and inefficient with very few exceptions. Like if you want to be a doctor, for instance, you do have to go to advanced school. But for the most part, consider what you want to do with your life and consider where the opportunities are. Clearly, the biggest opportunities are in cryptocurrency, whether it's from the financial side. I mean, the Chicago finance side is being phased out and the cryptocurrency side is being phased in. That's just the nature of the world. And clearly, if you have some motivation and any kind of skill set, use it. Look and, you know, find people at your local meetups, at the World Crypto Network, chat rooms, anywhere, and move forward with it. Because, man, and the other thing that that comes out of this is, you know, I always say, you know, we see how much progress has been made at Bitcoin. I mean, man, the price hit $20,000 and we have SegWit and all these technologies. But the fact is, the vast majority of the world has not a clue what's going on. I mean, whether it's you talk to your family, friends, colleagues, no one has any idea. And the fact that just a year ago, 9 people were chatting about the Lightning Network, 9 people, and those 9 people actually affected this much change in 1 year, shows you how much can get done and how much does get done in this decentralized, merit-based cryptocurrency system. Now, on the topic of Zap, why don't you just tell us what exactly problems your wallet solves? Is it currently functional? And what does it do that other competitors don't, if there are, in fact, competitors at this point?
Yeah, so the reason that I started Zap more broadly than just putting a user interface on top of the Lightning Network protocol so that people can interact with it well is this general movement where Bitcoin is becoming more mainstream and becoming more consumer facing. And we have to start designing applications that make sense to people. And the relationship that people have with cryptocurrency and with their screens and with the protocols and with the networks should be taken a lot more seriously. So it's just this general idea where Bitcoin is maturing and it's almost as this like next step on the ladder, as, you know, your $100 billion mark as a, you know, a financial asset, as a commodity, as a store of value. And then also with things like the Lightning Network as a revolutionary payment system, the amount of people that we're reaching and the amount of money and liquidity that's in this market now has really grown up from years ago. So I think that a lot of these applications, as we go to this mainstream consumer-facing era, where Bitcoin can be used for all types of payments and smart contracts and applications on top of, you know, the layer 1 blockchain, a lot of the user experience and user interface stuff has to be taken more seriously. So Zap, you know, why I started playing with this stuff originally was just like, how do people want to interact with Lightning? What problems are they trying to solve? Who's the people that need this today? And why are they using it? What do they want it to look like? What's their relationship like with Bitcoin? All of these questions and how we design screens and manage the relationship with people in crypto to make it as easy as possible. So that's kind of, you know, the general interest I had, was that a lot of the user experience in this space, you know, frankly sucks. It's very terrible. Those that are involved went through a lot of self-education, spent a lot of time and a lot of late hours understanding stuff that they had no idea what it was previously. And that's just part of being an early adopter, and you've been rewarded financially probably, unless you bought, you know, in December. But, you know, going forward, if this is going to be a technology similar to the internet that just grows parabolic, you know, and is widespread through mainstream adoption, we need to take that relationship with, as far as software and people using it more seriously. So that's kind of like the broad angle of Zap, is to try and build really beautiful and easy to use applications on top of these really complex protocols. And then, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, but essentially, it's a Bitcoin wallet in which you can affect Lightning transactions from.
Yeah, so the actual functionality of it is that it supports the Lightning Network. So it supports, normal Bitcoin transactions as well. So you can use it just like you use any other Bitcoin wallet. But it supports Lightning transactions, which are much more efficient and a lot cheaper, obviously. So I don't know. We also don't like look at competitors the way it's totally free, open source. I've turned down all investment opportunities from venture capitalists so far, just because I want Bitcoin to succeed. So, if we have competitors and they have questions, I hope that they ask and use the code that we've developed, and we, approach this, in a decentralized community way and are efficient about really, scaling Bitcoin as quick as we can. But yeah, its core functionality is that it natively supports the Lightning Network, which is why it's appealing to most.
Great. Well, one thing I found too, after a long 3-decade career, is that this is the first community I've ever been where by simply giving, you're increasing your odds of getting. On Wall Street, when you give stuff for free, you don't get anything for it. But here, the gift of knowledge comes back to you. There's good karma, and there's people desperately seeking experts. And obviously you're an expert, and I'm doing my best to become one, at least from my side. And good for you. I think Zap Wallet is going to be something that's going to be a buzzword for, kind of synonymous with the Lightning Network going forward. Now,
appreciate it.
Yeah, on the bigger topic of second layer scaling in general, I'd like to hear your take of what Bitcoin might look like a year from now, as well as 2 and 3 years. What technologies, aside from Lightning, will have the biggest impact? And what role will altcoins, if any, play in a world where Bitcoin is cheap and fast, with by far the broadest and most secure network?
So what will Bitcoin look like in a year from now? In a year from now, I'm fairly positive that you'll be able to send, comparatively free transactions that will settle instantly for goods and services. I'm not necessarily bullish on any particular Lightning Network use case. I think there's a lot of them, and a lot of the hidden value propositions of the Lightning Network, I think, are still yet to be explored. Things like super fast and comparatively free are things that Visa offers, right? Things like zero counterparty risk, for example, is something that no one offers with insanely and free transactions, insanely fast and free. So as far as like use cases or what I think, will be the first, Lightning killer app or anything like that, I don't have a real answer, honestly. It's anyone's guess. I'm more just bullish on scaling Bitcoin and making sure that all of these use cases are viable and we can scale this thing to the world. And then what was the second part? What are some other technologies that could
the other part was, what role will altcoins, if any, play in a world where Bitcoin is cheap and fast with the broadest and most secure network?
Oh, I'm beating up on altcoins today, but I have to do it again. I'm not bullish altcoins at all. Bitcoin will be a decentralized, uncorrelated asset from traditional markets, a safe haven, it'll turn into a great store of value as this market matures, and a must-have in any portfolio as an asset. And then on top of that, it will serve as a payment network that is programmable money, so it can host applications. It has zero counterparty risk, so it's directly peer-to-peer. This means that not only can you pay for hot dogs and pay for gas, but also there's been lots of interest with people like large financial firms that wonder if they can operate in a new financial market with cryptocurrencies and assets that can do Lightning Network atomic swaps, because with no counterparty risk, you don't have to deal with things like a clearinghouse or get permission from anybody else, as long as the assets and money that you want to trade is up front. So there's way larger use cases as this smart payment network. So if I'm an altcoin, I'm shaking in my boots. I'm pumping as much as I can, because I really don't think these things will be around in 10 years, maybe not, a couple if they're lucky. So.
Well, let's finish this topic with your view on what I call my game changer prediction for 2018. For 2017, it was in hindsight. I didn't have a prediction. I was still in the precious metal markets in the beginning of the year. But in hindsight, what changed Bitcoin's complexion was the victory in the scaling debate and the SegWit activation. That was what changed everything. That's what made the price move, and that's what got us to where we are today. For 2018, I have said that I believe by year end, the game change will be the realization that the Bitcoin network is far faster and cheaper December 31st than it was January 1st. Do you agree with that, or is that too optimistic?
No, I agree with that. I think, though, that the game changer will be that a lot of the outside investors looking in, still a bit skeptical, will be that they understand that Bitcoin can improve and can be built on top of and can scale. I think that there's still an insane amount of money sitting on the outside and have questions about this asset. And, Lightning Network will be functional within 12 months. I'm fairly confident about that. How functional, though, I'm not totally sure. I don't want to pitch a dream. It's really unclear. And the fact that it's a protocol and not a product means it'll get rolled out in phases, right? Like, technically, the Lightning Network works and is live right now. You can use it. I wouldn't advise you to use it, but you can. It's totally up to you. It's permissionless to join that network. So how functional in 12 months? But I think that the pure fact that we can get something like SegWit, we can have decentralized governance and move past, bad actors, and that we can build on top of, what already is Bitcoin and scale it, confidential transactions and more privacy coming. I think that will really entice outside investors, and whoever doesn't own Bitcoin after the year 2018 is doing it wrong, in my opinion. That's my guess.
Well, on the topic to finish 2018, I'd like to hear your views on what the biggest positive surprises are likely to be they political, social, or financial, and conversely, what worries you the most in terms of issues, if any, that could slow the Bitcoin revolution down?
That's a great question.
It's a big question, I know.
Yeah, that's a good one, though. I think some of us a surprise positive. I think that, I mean, I don't know how big of a surprise this would be to some of the people that are super tuned in, but I think the Jamie Dimons, the Goldman Sachs, a lot of these large financial institutions, and a lot of these large players, in technology space, like I know Stripe recently dropped Bitcoin, but a lot of those type of companies are going. Samsung, yeah, all of these types of companies are going to be very involved in the space. I think that banks will start buying Bitcoin. I think that governments will start buying Bitcoin. And I think that a lot of these, traditional technology companies will start integrating things like Lightning Network, will be very interested in researching and providing resources to the space. And I think that will take a lot of people by surprise, that Bitcoin does not have as many enemies as people think. It's not, the people versus the man necessarily. This is a technology. The metric I like to use, people love to use price. Bitcoin's either going to take over the world or it's going to die based on what color the candle is. I think what's really going parabolic is the resources invested in the people that are willing to back this technology. And I think that's going to really take people by surprise. It's like Lightning Network had 9 people involved in this one chat a year ago, like you said, and now it's this growing industry. I think it'll keep growing at that rate, just Bitcoin in general.
Right. Go on.
Things I'm concerned about. Not much, to be totally honest with you. I think the one thing that can slow us down potentially is some harsh regulation. I know that the recent hearing was generally positive, but I guess if, the U.S. government really wanted to, pick its nose and pick a fight with the general cryptocurrency market, and even things like ICOs are not necessarily good for Bitcoin. Introducing scammy products and associating us with really classic pump and dump, type of maneuvers that have been around for decades. I think that regulation is going to come in fierce where it's supposed to for ICOs, but it could potentially affect Bitcoin, and it wouldn't hurt anything. It wouldn't kill anything, but it could definitely slow it down. So I think that would maybe be my #1 thing to watch is the relationship with things like the SEC and with, just traditional regulation in general.
Right. Okay. Well, these are great answers I'd love to comment on. First of all, you talk about central banks and banks. I've been saying all along central banks are going to buy. I couldn't be more vocal that I believe the Bank of Japan already has a very big position. In fact, I was watching this debate going on with the Winklevoss brothers, and at the what's it called, Michael Milken Institute the other day, and that very topic came up. There's no doubt that governments, in many cases, are going to take this on. It's like I've said that their decisions are going to make on crypto are going to make or break their futures. To me, it's adapt to survive. Banks are going to be buying Bitcoin not because they're adapting to the world. They're just trying to survive, because Bitcoin will destroy banks more than any other sector. And if they want to, they and governments want to survive, they're going to have to buy it. Governments have debt in this Ponzi scheme, this fiat Ponzi scheme that's out of control. They got to buy Bitcoin. Banks want to keep up with the future of financing. I just did a crypto audio blog the other day saying ICOs are the future. I've said that banks and stocks and bonds are dead. That's the past. The future is ICOs. So if you're a bank, you better be buying Bitcoin, and you better be looking into ICO investment banking, which most of it is going to be decentralized anyway, but you got to give it a shot. And as for the negatives, yeah, when you ask anyone what are the negatives, I've said this correction is the biggest correction I've ever seen with not a single negative thing going on. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not worried about anything. The U.S. government is the only remaining real government that can really do anything. The ECB would never agree because they got 25 countries in there. Probably half of them are pro-Bitcoin. And as for the U.S. government, they only do things. Reactively. Like when the price was 20,000, if stock markets were falling, yeah, they'd attack. Now they're just like, whatever. Bitcoin crashed. We have no interest. We do our Senate panel hearings. We just pay it lip service and we walk away. I don't see anything that's in Bitcoin's path this year at all. I really don't. Not that things can't come up. So again, from a risk-reward profile, and you talk about the price is down 50%, I think it's a pretty good opportunity here to set your future, just as the banks and the central banks are thinking. Now, finally, I want to address something that you said last week, Jack, which I retweeted with the comment. One of the best Bitcoin tweets ever. And here's the tweet. Bitcoin will succeed. Why? Because I won't let it die. The developers, hodlers, unbanked, millennials, etc. won't let it die. What's really going parabolic is the number of people willing to fight for Bitcoin and all it stands for. Things like price have no choice but to follow. Now, I know it sounds self-explanatory. This is me speaking. But given that your ultimate goal, Jack, as well as mine and the World Crypto Networks, is to empower people to exit legacy financial systems for a Star Trekian future centered around Bitcoin, tell me what Bitcoin means in the spirit of this tweet to you.
Yeah, so people like that tweet. I think where that came from is just the general metric of price and people trying to follow that and attach beliefs to what Bitcoin was last sold at this second. I think what Bitcoin is more backed by is a belief that, there's a better system than the current one out there in traditional markets, right? And the people that I think it was Balaji of 21.co is a Bitcoin company. I think it was his quote, which was, when voice is no longer sufficient, exit is the most powerful action you can take. And what we're starting to see is people that are Bitcoin, first and foremost, is an education vehicle above all else. And people are becoming educated on money, what it is today, and then why Bitcoin exists in the first place, and able to compare and contrast. And the amount of people that are willing to get behind Bitcoin and fight for it, from an idealist standpoint, to oppose what's going on in traditional markets and central banking and nation state fiat money, and exiting the system and hedging against the system, I think, is what's really going parabolic. Things like price have traditional market cycles, and big players can manipulate it. And, if Wall Street wants to accumulate at 6,000, they can probably get away with that. But what's really going parabolic is this general belief that Bitcoin is better money and is here to stay, and that the fact that a money can operate outside a third party is a good thing and is a valuable thing. And things like price and things like mainstream adoption and whether people are using it to buy groceries and stuff, all of that stuff will end up coming. But what's most important, and what Satoshi, in my opinion, gave us, is a belief and a proof that this can work. And Bitcoin, first and foremost, is this education vehicle and mindset and how you look at money and understand money. So that's kind of what I was getting at.
Right. And, especially with what I've dealt with in my career and my investments, before Bitcoin, you couldn't exit. I mean, you were forced into stock markets that were rigged, bond markets that were rigged. I did my best to escape into precious metals, but that wasn't allowed. The governments would not let that happen. And now that Bitcoin's around, precious metals are moot. I sold all mine because there's no reason to own them in a world, digital age, where you have Bitcoin, which is such a sounder and better proposition for everything that gold has ever done. And the other thing that when you talk about the hope and all these people that are joining on that want to defend it, for the most part, we're talking about the younger generations. The older generations have had things handed to them by the social welfare system, by the QE, by all the debt that can't be done anymore. We're past saturation and the world is changing. There's going to be less jobs because there's going to be more technology and things are changing. And so the millennials who are behind it, I wrote an article a few months ago that it was something to the tune of the secret weapon of Bitcoin and gold. For gold, the secret weapon was all the old people who will not change and will hold on to their gold until eventually the young people who are Bitcoin's secret weapon get a hold of it, in which case they'll probably sell it for more Bitcoin. So as the world progresses and more of the world's youth start to take over, this general mindset of digital currency, and when I say digital currency, I mean Bitcoin, is going to just get stronger. So with that, we're going to conclude today's podcast, featuring someone who I expect to be a leading voice in the Bitcoin community for decades to come, particularly amongst the millennials and Gen Zs who will mold the monetary system of the future. To that end, Jack can be found on Twitter at @JackMallers, while the Zap wallet can be found at zap.jackmallers.com. As for me, please try a free 7-day trial membership at cryptogoldcentral.com, or contact me about consultation sessions at Hoffman at cryptogoldcentral.com. Thanks very much and have a great crypto day.